Hi, I'm Craig Miller, owner of Rocky Mountain Firearms Academy LLC, based out of Colorado. I am an NRA certified pistol instructor and a retired 27-year veteran of law enforcement. The information that I share with you today will start you on the path to being able to keep you and your family safer in the unpredictable world we live in. This information is available to you absolutely free. However, if you wish to continue on and receive a concealed handgun permit, after you complete the online safety class, you will need to pass the basic skills assessment provided. You are required to abide by the terms and conditions of this website and the laws of the state in which you reside. You will also be required to complete a background check that will be conducted by the Virginia State Police. This training is divided into different chapters throughout the course. You may review each chapter as many times as necessary to learn the information that will be covered in the final exam. Complete this course at your own pace, and if you ever want additional training or information, please contact Rocky Mountain Firearms Academy. If you were attacked today, would you be mentally and physically prepared to defend yourself or a loved one in a time of need? Complete this online safety course to qualify you for a concealed handgun permit and take your first step in improving your safety. Remember, you must meet the requirements and pass the background check before you can receive your concealed handgun permit. The most common cause of firearm-related accidents is carelessness. The firearm safety rules are in place to reduce your risk of being the victim of an accident or worse, victimizing an innocent person. You must consistently follow these rules every time you handle a firearm. Do not become complacent. Complacency can lead to carelessness, which can result in tragedy. Rule number 1, treat all firearms as if they are always loaded. You should consider every firearm loaded until you visually and physically check to ensure that it is unloaded. Before anyone hands you a firearm, they should check to see if it is unloaded and show you that it is unloaded prior to you receiving it. After you have received the firearm, you should double check it to ensure that it is unloaded. Continue to treat the firearm as if it is loaded the entire time you handle it, no exceptions. Rule number 2, keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to shoot. Your index finger should not be on the trigger until you are on target and prepared to shoot. It should be above and away from the trigger guard, not on the trigger guard. Whether you pick up your firearm from a table or you draw it from a holster, this does not change. When you are on target and you are ready to shoot, you can move your finger from the side or slide of the gun to the trigger. When you come off target, your finger should return to the slide or side of the firearm in a smooth motion and remain off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire once again. If you are using a semi-automatic firearm, you should familiarize yourself with the trigger reset of that firearm to reduce the travel time of the trigger for repetitive fire. There is only one exception to this rule. If your firearm requires you to drop the firing pin to disassemble it for maintenance, then and only then can you violate this rule, as long as the gun has been visually and physically checked to ensure that it is unloaded. This also goes along with rule number 3 by making sure the muzzle is not covering anything you are not willing to destroy before you press the trigger prior to disassembling the firearm. Rule number 3, never let the muzzle of a firearm cover anything you are not willing to destroy. Your firearm should be pointed in a safe direction at all times. The only exception to this rule is if you are using it to defend yourself or another person from an imminent threat of serious bodily injury or death, at which point you would point it at the threat with the intent of stopping that threat. Otherwise, you never let the muzzle cover anything that you do not want to inflict permanent damage upon. Obviously, this includes any part of your body, another person, or another item of property you are not willing to destroy. In general, a safe direction for the muzzle of a firearm is down and away from your body, or downrange at the targets while at a shooting facility. Always be muzzle conscious and pay attention to how you handle your firearm. You should use the muzzle of the firearm as a pivot point to avoid pointing it at anything you are not willing to destroy. Rule number 4, always be certain of your target and anything beyond your target. You are always responsible for every bullet that is fired from your firearm. You should consider this. Every bullet has a lawsuit attached to it. The potential of you being sued for careless use of your firearm may go down as you pay attention to this rule. Whether you're at a shooting facility or pointing your firearm in defense of yourself or others, you should always be aware of what is beyond your target so that you do not intentionally endanger innocent bystanders. In a stressful life and death situation, you may experience what is called tunnel vision, which can greatly reduce your ability to observe what is beyond your target. In these cases, you must exercise the utmost caution. Consider this. Some situations may require you to advance towards a target to obtain a better, clearer, and closer shot. Under the direction of an experienced firearm instructor, you should consider practicing this technique of advancing as well as retreating to cover to obtain a better shooting angle at any range that allows you to do so. Number 1, always be sure your firearm is safe to operate. Visually and physically check the firearm for any loose, missing, or damaged parts. If you discover one of these situations, do not use the firearm until a qualified armor has repaired it. Number 2, always consult the owner's manual and ensure you are familiar with how to safely use the firearm you have purchased. Each firearm company manufactures their firearms with different mechanisms. Be familiar with these differences. The manual will also identify the proper ammunition that should be used with your firearm. This information is also stamped on the barrel or frame of the firearm. This can be compared to the hand stamp on the ammunition itself. The owner's manual will also describe how to maintain and clean your firearm. Number 3, always wear ear and eye protection as appropriate when practicing with your firearm. Follow the rules of the particular range you are using. Number 4, never use alcohol or any legal or illegal drugs before or during shooting. The law dictates that you not be under the influence of these substances while using a firearm. Number 5, store the firearm away from unauthorized persons, such as children, those prohibited by law from possessing firearms, and untrained individuals. Some states require the use of a safe for proper storage of your firearm when not in use. This does not preclude you from having a firearm immediately accessible to you in case of an emergency. Your situation will dictate how you prepare for just such an occurrence. This is a standard self-defense revolver. The difference between this revolver and other revolvers is the lack of an exposed hammer. The firing mechanism is contained within the frame here. This revolver has a frame, cylinder, barrel, grip, trigger, trigger guard, front sight, and a rear notch sight. To open the cylinder, press the cylinder release, pushing the cylinder open for loading. I'm going to load it with dummy rounds for safety purposes. Once it's loaded, close the cylinder and rotate it until it locks into place, denoted by the click and by the fact that the cylinder will no longer rotate. The gun is now ready to be fired. This is an example of a semi-automatic firearm. For our purposes, I'm showing you an unloaded firearm. No round in the chamber, no magazine in the magazine well. This is the slide. Within the slide is contained the barrel. This is the chamber portion of the barrel. Also on the slide is a front sight and a rear sight. This is the frame of the firearm. On the frame is the trigger guard, and this is the trigger with the trigger safety. This is the slide release and the magazine release. To load this firearm, you would place bullets in the magazine, then insert the magazine, smartly into the magazine well. Tug on the magazine to make sure it's seated correctly. Then you would rack the slide to allow a round to go from the magazine into the chamber. The gun is now ready to be fired. The isosceles stance is done with your feet about shoulder width apart, your toes evenly aligned in the front, and your knees slightly bent. Your arms also come up in front of you together with your elbows slightly bent. When you aim the firearm, you obtain a sight picture first, and then you align your sights. Trigger control is done by placing the middle pad of your index finger on the trigger and slowly squeezing the trigger to a surprise breaking point. You do not want to anticipate the shot. Breath control is done by shooting at the natural respiratory pause. You don't hold your breath, you breathe normally. Breathe in, breathe out, fire. Follow-through is done by holding the trigger for a count of 1001 after you have fired the shot. Avoid the temptation to look at the target. After you have fired the shot, release the trigger slowly until you find trigger reset for the next shot.